Okay, welcome back to the Coderoom, everybody. Now today is all about creating your first HTML document. Okay, so in previous episodes we saw how Word can open up Word documents, and you know that Acrobat Reader can open up PDF documents, and we found out that browsers are pretty similar. That browsers can open up documents called HTML documents. Now, if you're curious, HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. Okay, so those are HTML documents. So we showed you in the previous episode how I opened up an HTML document. So in this episode, we're going to create your first HTML document. Okay, so now before we get started, we're going to kind of just set up a little bit of some folders to keep yourself organized, okay? Just like how you would create a folder to store all your homework for a certain course, or you create a folder for all your tax documents or something like that. We're going to create folders for the work that we do throughout this video series, okay? So let's start by that. So on Mac, I'm just going to open up my Finder. Again, on Windows, you can open up My Computer or whatever, your home folder. I'm going to go to my folder here, Casey Lee, and I like to create a folder called Dev. Okay, so you can create a new folder and just call it Dev. Dev stands for development, or you can call it development work or software or whatever you want to call it. And because I do a lot of different types of projects in development, I create a folder for each type. So in this case, I'm going to create a folder called Web Projects. So you might want to create a folder called Web Projects. And in there, we're going to create a folder for this specific project that we're going to work on. Okay, so I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm just going to call it my first website. Okay, you can call it whatever you want. And this is where I'm actually going to save my files. Okay, so just like you create a Word document and you save in a certain folder, I'm going to do the same thing here. Okay, so to create that new document, you can use Notepad, you can use any of these text editors. The one that we decided to download was Sublime. Okay, so I'm going to open up Sublime, and all I'm going to do is go File, New File. Okay, so I have a file here as a new file. And then before I type anything in it, I'm just going to save this file. Okay, so I'm going to go File, Save. Okay. Now I'm going to save this into that dev folder I talked about. So in my home folder, I have the dev folder, web projects, and my first website. So I'm going to save it into that folder. And I'm going to call it index.html. Okay? Index will become clear in future episodes why we start with index. And then HTML is the extension. So save that file. Okay? And if you want to see, it's just like any other file, like saving a Word document. Okay, I can see right here, Casey Lee, dev, web projects, my first website. There's that file sitting right there, okay? Just like you created a new Word document, okay? So this is an HTML document, okay? So it's a different type of document, okay? And then we're gonna start to type stuff in here, okay? This is where we actually start to type code, okay? This is where we start to type the stuff that our browser is gonna interpret and put up on the screen, okay? So now the question is, what exactly do we type in an HTML document? In a Word document, we type paragraphs and we type headers and we highlight things and make them bold and all this stuff like that. What do we type in an HTML document? So you're going to type code, and HTML is a specific type of code. Okay, so HTML, like I said, stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It's a specific language that has its own rules about how you type things in there. Okay, the basic building block, okay, of HTML or any HTML document, okay, is called a tag. Okay, so what does a tag look like? Okay, so a tag looks something like this, okay? You have what's called an opening tag, and you have what's called a closing tag, okay? And all tags, okay, start with a kind of a less than sign, okay, and then end with a greater than sign, and have some kind of label in the middle there, okay? So this is known as the opening tag. Then you will also have a corresponding closing tag, okay? And the only difference in opening and closing tag is this / right here, okay? And you'll see when you look at HTML documents, there's all these opening tags and closing tags everywhere, okay? And the way typically HTML works and the way tags work is you have an opening tag, and you can put some stuff in the middle here. Okay, we don't know what that is yet. We'll put some stuff in the middle there, and then we have a closing tag. Okay. Now, it's always the way that HTML works is that every time you open a tag, you have to have a corresponding closing tag in the document, okay? So a really good way to program is anytime you open a tag, you instantly close that tag, okay? So you instantly close it, so you don't forget to close it, basically, okay? So that's what a tag looks like. Now, in this diagram here, I have the word something. Now, something is not a real HTML tag, but there are all these different types of HTML tags that you will learn over the course of this video series, okay? And programming HTML is all about knowing those tags and knowing what you can put in between those tags. And later on in future episodes, we'll look about attributes of tags and how to use those tags. That's what HTML programming is all about, is understanding those tags, how to structure those tags, and so on and so forth, okay? So that's what a tag looks like. You have an opening tag, closing tag, and the tags always start with a less than sign and end with a greater than sign. Let's take a look at an actual real tag that a browser will understand. Here's an example of a real tag. Okay, this is known as the HTML tag. And in fact, every HTML document has this opening and closing HTML tag. And in fact, it's the kind of biggest higher level tag, and almost everything else you put in a web page goes in between these tags, okay? So HTML is an example of a real tag, and you will learn about other tags like table and anchor and list and all these other things you'll learn in the coming episodes, okay? But these are what are known as tags, and here's a real example of a tag. Now, something that is very important to know about HTML is that HTML is what we refer to as a non-white space dependent language, okay? And what that generally means is that when you have enters or spaces, okay, generally those don't really matter. You can have 10 spaces in between these, or you can have a bunch of enter lines in between these, and it generally won't matter. There are certain specific cases where it does, but generally it does not matter. So what that means is when you're typing an HTML tag, okay, these are all really the same. So you can type it without any spaces and just type it all in one line, or you can type it on two separate lines, or you can type it on two separate lines with some space in between, okay? And all these three are really the same thing, okay? And it's really up to your programming style, how you want to organize things, and how many spaces you want to put in. Now, even though it's not a white space dependent language, one thing you should understand is that it's always good to keep your code organized, okay? So usually programmers, what they do is to keep things indented, and you'll see that as we kind of program, okay? But just know that as we go along, there'll be some cases where I put it all in one line, there'll be some cases where I put it on two lines, there'll be some cases where I enter some extra space in between just to kind of separate things so it's easy to understand, okay? So, two things we just learned about HTML. First, okay, that the basic building block of HTML documents are tags, and this is what they look like, okay? The second thing we learned about is that it's not generally white space dependent, okay? So you can kind of organize your code how you want. I recommend if you're a first-time programmer to follow exactly how I organize it.